as a comedian, you're supposed to stand in front of an audience and be confident and be sure. And they're supposed to trust you that no matter where you lead them, even if it starts off uncomfortable, even if it seems like it's not going to go somewhere that's funny, that it gets there. And I think that's why a lot of people in comedy sometimes don't want to talk about their mental health.
Welcome to Healing with Tom Insel. We often talk about comedy as the opposite of tragedy and humor as the opposite of depression, but in fact, often the two go very much together. And today, we're going to be diving into a question about how does a comedian deal with depression? I'm Dr. Tom Insel, and I'm delighted to be the host for this podcast and delighted to welcome Yamaneika Saunders, who is a comedian, a writer, an actor, someone who's been doing stand up, and who also has a lived experience that she's going to talk with us about today. Yamaneika, welcome. It's great to have you on Healing.
Thank you for having me.
Some people will know you through social media and they'll know about your story and they'll know about you as an up and coming comedian. But for those who don't, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are now?
Yeah, I'm a comedian, I'm a writer. I don't know about up and coming. I've been doing comedy for over 20 years, but new to a lot of people. In most recent times, had some really great career accelerations, but also in the process of that, have in looking at myself and um, trying to heal and you know be the best creative I can be, since I have to deal with life and oftentimes telling the story of others and as well as myself. Got into therapy and then went from seeing a therapist to seeing a psychiatrist, and really discovered a lot of things about myself and a lot of things that helped me realize some of the chaos that was going on in my head.
There's a kind of trope here, isn't there? Like the sad clown, kind of the story about, and you can think of Robin Williams or Mark Maron or even Lewis Black. I mean, people who have been incredibly successful and
Mhm.
brilliant comedians who have struggled severely with depression. Um, is that is that a story that resonates with you? Does that feel real?
Yeah, I think comedy is looks at the world and tells the audience, opens up a layer of either things we don't talk about or things that are not seen, and we do it in a humorous way. Sometimes the revealing of a situation or really saying what is going on or saying those unspoken things is what leads to people relaxing enough to find humor or to laugh. Um, and I think because comedians, some of the greats are those that really take the time to look at the world, to talk about it, to share. That takes a toll. I think it's not even just comedians, really, like anybody. Like my grandparents were pastors of a church, and they had to take on a lot of people's problems and concerns and energy. And with that, there was a lot of times where they were getting down just because you're taking on so much of the energy of the world. So I think people who are in occupations like that, who have to receive so much and may not have places to funnel it, um, oftentimes can see a lot of dark spaces.
Yeah, yeah, I get it. How did you start doing stand up?
I've been acting since I was a kid, classically trained in the theater. I wasn't interested in stand up at all. My mother got me into stand up. She was taking stand up classes and, thought it would be something that would be good for me to do. And, here we are. I got into stand up somehow.
Some people say that is the hardest and most stressful and can be the most brutal form of acting. Has it what's it been like for you?
There's a lot of different layers to what is uncomfortable about doing stand up. If you are someone who has stage fright, which is something completely separate, that's a problem, right? So I think a lot of people think of comedy as being hard because they cannot fathom, being in front of a large group of people, and then also the responsibility is you have to make those people laugh. The harder part of the business of comedy is the business part of it. Oftentimes, one of the leading causes of depression oftentimes is not feeling accepted or not feeling there's a place or being understood. And oftentimes, depending on your humor, not everyone gets the same type of humor. Not every comic is the same. So, there can be a lot of rejection in this business. You're not right for this, you're not right for that. And really, what has helped me over time is learning that I may not be right for everything, but I am right for the audience that is mine.
And how do you define that audience? What is that audience? Those are your peeps, but who are that? Who are those people for you?
People that are not. I mean, I say this loosely because I know we are in a time of people being on guard about conversations and certain topics that can't be broached, and I think sometimes people exploit trying to be controversial, deliberately. But I think my people are people who just are living life and want to tell the truth and want to speak about those things and be honest about your fears, be honest about those things you don't agree with, be honest about those things that um, might seem inappropriate, but we still have to tell the story of how we got there.
So it's really great to hear you frame what you do in terms of speaking truth. And that's the way I'm hearing you unpack this, that when you're thinking about comedy, you're thinking about how do you talk about the things that need to be talked about that maybe people do not want to face or address.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing that you got to that point because you had to do that with yourself in some way. You begin to explore parts of yourself that maybe weren't that easy to take a look at or didn't want to accept. I'd love to learn more about that. I like what your own personal journey was and how you got to this very wise place where you're able to not only look at it but laugh at it.
In my life, I've had familiar relationships, I've had romantic relationships, friend relationships, where sometimes you come to an impasse, and then there's a conversation about who you are from the perspective of other people. And for me, I have encountered a lot of emotional and mental abuse from people that I've allowed into my space for a number of reasons, that, deal with, my own abandonment issues. And because of that, I've had to look at myself and go, what is me and what isn't me? And do a lot of self-reflection. And I think the best comedians, I mean, I don't want to say this arrogantly, like I'm putting myself in the best comedians, but I think the comedians that execute comedy well are the ones that can look at themselves and look at the good, the bad, um, and relate it to the humanness um, of life. And I've taken some really deep dives into myself and finding the space in which I can contribute to the world in a positive way, and not be a hindrance.
Can you unpack that a little bit? Because I get that, I get it that you've been you've become more self-aware and that you've got a sense of who you are and some of what you've suffered with, whether it's trauma or abuse or whatever that felt like to you. What I'm interested in is how you go from seeing that, knowing that, to sharing that and getting up on a stage in front of a lot of people and talking about it, and how you turn what is really painful into something that's really funny. Like tell tell us how that happens for you, because that is a very special gift.
I sit in being uncomfortable a lot. Um, and the way in which I have to become comfortable in a situation is I have to die to it. I have to go all the way down to the ground to what I'm feeling. I talk about the most painful things and they don't seem like they're painful because I've already processed the pain. Is, when we talked about like the pandemic and the things that we had to experience there, when I've talked about um, relationships, when I've talked about our president or, our policies, it oftentimes comes from places where um, they have been the most insecure spots for me, the most uncomfortable, those spaces where I feel a lack of control. Um, and whatever I say to pep talk myself out of it generally becomes where the joke is.
Wow.
When we had the experience of January 6th, it's a bit that I have out in the world. And we just watched the world just be in chaos. And wondering what that meant as a Black person, what that meant for me, um, in a world that seemed very agitated, um, with people like me, or losing to people like me. There was a lot of fear. There was a lot of uncomfortability. Also, being older and understanding that we haven't really gone away from when I was younger with some of the stuff. It almost seems like it was rising. Um, but then it became a point when I would watch it and it just looked like a Benny Hill sketch to me, with people running and like, what is it? What is happening? Why is this happening? It the circus of it all. I'll say that much of it. And from that came a bit that really broke down the layers of what we focus on in this country, um, who we defined as being dangerous, and how our lack of accountability in protecting our country against everyone that means danger for us is the reason why we're in so much danger.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the funny part to that.
Well, I'm not telling you the joke of it,
Okay.
but it is very funny.
Okay.
And it is very controversial because in in that some of that is me talking to white America, right? And me unfolding as a Black woman who watches this nonsense all the time in this country, how there's certain things that I could not get away with that were probably very less than January 6th. But I probably would be punished worse than those people in January 6th. So we have to come with terms with all those things. So it's me dealing with my anxieties, my fears, and just talking about them.
Yeah, got it. Got it. Okay, I think I see where you're going now. I can't wait to hear the whole routine. But it does seem to me that what you're able to do here is to make the particulars for you as a Black woman who has struggled with some mental health issues, who has triumphed over a lot of those issues, uh, that the special thing that you've been able to do here is not only to begin to address them, but to turn them into something that other people can relate to, and other
Hmm.
people can take something from that through humor,
Hmm.
because people can hear something when it's funny that they may have a hard time seeing when it's serious.
I think that happens a lot in comedy, of people who are dealing through things. Not every comedian is interested in having quite a narrative, you know. Um, as a comedian, you're supposed to stand in front of an audience and be confident and be sure. And they're supposed to trust you that no matter where you lead them, even if it starts off uncomfortable, even if it seems like it's not going to go somewhere that's funny, that it gets there. And I think that's why a lot of people in comedy sometimes don't want to talk about their mental health, because it seems like a deterrent to people trusting you when you say that you're somebody that suffers from anxiety or you're somebody that suffers with depression.
Do you worry that talking about anxiety or depression in a comedy skit somehow trivializes it or doesn't do justice to the pain that's involved? Is that ever a risk, or how do you see that?
No, I don't. It's not a risk for me. Um, I talk about my experiences. I talk about how I feel. Um, I think that for me, I've always talked in some place of angst, right? It just took me, talking to a psychiatrist and them saying, "Yo, you have anxiety." I think a lot of people suffer from that. Probably almost everyone. We're in a very anxious time. We are in, uh, a place of a lot of uncertainty. We're seeing people act out in the world in ways in which we've never seen before. I mean, I was just talking the other day with a friend, and we were talking about just the femicide rate of Black women and how that has increased and increased during the pandemic. And every 5 hours, 5.5 hours, a Black woman is being murdered. And we talked about a time when the women were off limits. We talked about a time where you felt comfortable as a woman in certain environments, and now you can't um, feel that way. And it addresses a lot of issues and concerns for me as a Black woman, which I think is probably one of the hardest experiences you can have in this world. But because that experience is also layered with being a woman, there are a lot of women that can relate to what I'm saying and what I'm going through. Um, I've had a few shows in the city during the pandemic, post pandemic, where women have come out and said that I have been an encouragement to them, my vulnerability and sharing. I don't hide anymore behind trying to go on stage and make you think I'm the most popular person in the room, or go on stage and make you feel like I have all the answers. When I go on stage, it's still a work in progress. And it's very much a participation of me and the audience. And a lot of where I find or refine and fine tune bits is from running it in front of audiences and finding where the heart of it is.
Yeah, Monique, where'd you find the courage to do that? Because that sounds to me like an incredibly scary proposition, to be trying to work this thing out for yourself and to go up and be as vulnerable as you're talking about in front of an audience where they're just coming for laughs and you're
Mhm.
bearing your soul. How do you do that? What does that take?
It's a thin line, right, between a comic telling their truth and bearing themselves and entertaining. I think I've seen a lot of comics get on a soapbox. I've seen a lot of comics berate audiences. Um, there's a delicate dance there. For me, I've always been the underdog. I've been bullied. I've been ostracized. I've been devalued. I've been gaslit. I've been emotionally used and abused. there's nothing else that could happen that I haven't experienced, um, living in the skin that I'm in. So there's no fear for me to go on stage and share those things. I think it's more important for you to get a sense of who I am and my personality than it is for me to hide behind generic jokes.
And do you think that the audience takes that with them? You think that that's are they, people like to say that emotion is contagious. Is courage contagious as well? I mean, can they take your vulnerability and allow themselves a piece of that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think my biggest compliment is when I have guys come up to me after and really express how much they enjoy the show, how much they like what they heard or got a different understanding or perspective of something. I'm not here to create enemies. I'm here to see how many friends I have, or more importantly, if I'm okay with who I am, it allows you to be okay with who you are.
I am struck by the way in which what you do does make it easier for others to follow suit and to talk about their own struggles. When you're vulnerable, when you talk about anxiety, when you talk about depression, and you do this so powerfully, um, that it opens the door.
Mhm.
And I think that's a remarkable gift for people who are struggling quietly but don't have the courage or don't have the opportunity, or they may just feel that this is a topic that's taboo for whatever reason and they can't go there. Um, you said before, and I think it's really a great way to frame it, is to say you can push yourself into uncomfortable places, and being uncomfortable isn't to you, um, isn't a taboo. You're willing to do that. And I think as you demonstrate that, that opens that opportunity for lots of people. And that's a remarkable, remarkable gift.
A lot of people come with stressors, with they're trying to find a release, and ignoring what's happening in life is not going to help, right?
Yeah.
So, we I personally like to deal with things that are immediately happening, and address them if there's something going on in the world, if they're, you know, because I'm human too, and that's really what it is. Like, it's about being human, and it's about um, how can I not be on a high horse, or how can I not be above the audience when I am here? And that is to let you know, um, this is the way that I think. This is who I am, and come along on the ride, because I know a lot of people think like me.
In these conversations we've been having, one of the things that we tend to do is we ask people if they could talk to their younger selves, what would they want to say? And I'd love to hear your thoughts about that.
It's so funny when you ask that, because I'm like, I want to know what my 20 year from now, 20-year-old from self is gonna say, like when I'm 20 years older than I am now.
We could go there too, but let's go back first and then we'll go forward.
I don't know what I would say to her, to be honest. I think every step that she's taking, it leads me to where I am right now. And I wouldn't change any of the ups or the downs. Um, it's something that I talked about I was talking to my mother, who I love dearly, and I've been talking to my father, and I really do love my parents, and I think parents oftentimes have regrets, no matter how good or bad, there are things that, as they talk to their adult children, that they wish they hadn't done, or places they hadn't been. And one of the things I told my mother, and I told my father as well, is there are things that I have to deal with from my childhood, just normal childhood things. None of the steps that were made would I change, because with all the ups and downs and the sadness that I've experienced, the depression that I've gone through, the anxiety that I've suffered through, I'm excited about where this story will end. And I like the steps that have happened, and I want them to happen. I would have them happen again.
No regrets.
So that I can end up here? Of course not.
All right. Well, I'm going to push you then to think about 20 years from now. And what does that story sound like?
I think 20 years from now, I will be telling my current self that it's all okay and it all worked out. And um, the the time that it's taken, um, the processes that I needed to go through, um, were important so that I could share. One of the things I think about when I was listening to a sermon a couple of days ago, and they were talking about Christ, and um, right before his crucifixion, there were so many emotions and so many things going on that he really had to take on, and to take those things on in order to understand what it feels like to have empathy, to have connection. Um, I count myself blessed to be someone that knows what it feels like to be anxious, be someone who understands what it means to be sad and to experience darkness, because I know how to reach people in those spots.
It takes me back to your earlier comment about your willingness to go places that are not comfortable and to sit with anxiety and sit with depression and to trust yourself with those. What I love about what you do is that it's not just that you trust yourself, but that you trust yourself to share them with others, which is such a remarkable and courageous step. So I want to thank you for what you do, and thank you for joining us at Healing. It's really been a pleasure hearing how you've managed this and hearing the way you think about mental health issues and the importance of being able to share them. I appreciate
Yeah,
that.
I wanted just to say thank you for the time, and I think it's important, when people listen back, I hope they understand the context of what I'm talking about. It could be easy to come on here and just laugh and joke through it, but I think that this part of it is very serious. And I think if people understood how serious comedians are before it gets funny, it has a better understanding of the process. I'm not saying that everyone is sacrificing themselves on a hill for comedy, because not everybody's good at it. Not everybody is, taking these steps, but really some of the best people I know in comedy, the times that we spend on stage and in conversation, it is in taking deeper dives into the world around us, our feelings, our emotions, and then we carry them on stage and make them hilarious.
Thank thank you for that.
Thank you.